Welcome to the ClearlyWell Podcast. I'm Elizabeth McKeon, a board-certified psychiatric mental health and addiction recovery nurse. This podcast aims to bridge the gap between mental health and substance use discussions, fostering understanding and empathy while reducing stigma. Join us as we amplify the voices of those with lived experiences, creating a non-judgmental space for their stories to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you. So did you know that nearly 1 in 2 people living with mental health conditions will also experience a substance use disorder in their lifetime? The connection between mental health and addiction is deep and long, and also really underserved in our profession. Okay, so it's a co-occurring disorder, and the folks that work in my profession as a practitioner and today's guest, we see this as a long time underdiagnosed condition. People that have mental health conditions often turn to substances like alcohol, opioids, benzodiazepines, stimulants, etc. to cope with symptoms of depression, anxiety, trauma, or even untreated ADHD. In my current practice, where I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, I see probably, I'm going to say, 3 out of 5 of my clients have ADHD, and it comes up. And I even think I have ADHD because I can't even function sometimes in a day. So you hit a wall in the afternoon, some of those types of things. So think about that with people that tend to turn to methamphetamine use, because we do prescribe methylphenidate, which is a methamphetamine salt for ADHD. So think about how that would work in an undiagnosed person trying to get something from the street to help with their issues. But even more important, guys, let's think about this. Treating one without addressing the other often leads to relapse. So there's that. That's why integrated care, a multi-diagnostic model, is most important. That's what I do. I treat whole body mind, whole body wellness, mind-gut connection is important. Addressing mental health and addiction at the same time should be the gold standard of how we address behavioral health in today's world. So hello, guys. Welcome to the ClearlyWell Podcast. Today, I'm so excited to introduce Mike Oxley. Mike, he is formerly one of the co-hosts of Talkin Trash Podcast, which is how I got to know Mike. He has been so endearing to me as to be a follower of mine, which I don't have. I think I only have 14,000 followers on TikTok. I don't have a big following. I think the biggest following I ever had on TikTok was actually Tim Snyder, Mike. I don't know if you know, but he hit almost 300,000 likes
Yes.
the day that he came in my studio with my producer. It's not my studio. I shouldn't have said that, Sean Clyde's studio with CNC Media. But we had a huge following that day. And I think that's largely because of my guest today, who I'm excited to talk about and welcome. Mike is a nurse. He is a subject matter expert in the correlation between mental health and addiction. And I'm going to let him talk when he is talking more about what he does. And so welcome, Mike
Hi.
Oxley. Thank you for being here
It's great
today.
to see you, Liz.
Yeah,
Great
good
to see you. And that is a very comfortable, fancy, psychiatric-looking couch you have behind you there.
Whoop, whoop.
It's great to see you. Like I said, I've been a little inundated with some personal issues,
Okay.
legal
Understand.
issues with my mother
I'm
and her
sorry.
health. She had broke her hip around Christmas, so I've been a little sidetracked
No,
and
understood.
had no idea that was going to be the beginning of the end. but it often
Mm.
is so much. But being in healthcare, sometimes, like the car mechanic that has the car that doesn't run so great is the nurse with the
Yeah.
mom that maybe doesn't, you know, have much mobility. But um, my my space in addiction really began when I decided that I wanted to go into addiction medicine.
Okay.
Was probably in one of the strangest places you'll ever want to realize, which was federal prison. That's when I
Okay.
decided that I wanted to be a nurse,
Okay.
and and
What year was that, Mike?
that was in 2010.
Okay.
I decided my second career, since my first career had pretty much sputtered out due to a federal indictment that I ended up eventually pleading guilty to from 2006.
Oh wow.
And I got sent right near you. Georgia will always be a piece of my heart. I went to Atlanta Federal Correction. Now,
Okay,
I was
Mike,
only
you got to tell
uh,
us how that happened. You went to
um
jail.
I went to prison,
You went
different
to
than jail.
prison. Okay, let's talk about that.
So, during the boom of real estate, the last big boom we had in like 2005,
Yeah.
2004, I had an appraisal company. I was a
Okay.
licensed appraiser in the state of New
Right.
Jersey, had
Okay.
a company, and before they could take cash out of a property, you would need an appraisal. And the banks were allowed to talk to you. And I had personal relationships for
Yeah.
many years with bankers, and I was their guy. I was their appraiser, and they wanted this number so they could make this loan.
All right.
And it looked like it almost caught up with each other. They were going up so fast, almost similarly to the last 3 years, that it couldn't catch up. The market couldn't catch up for what the next guy was selling. Well, why is the guy
Gotcha.
next door paying 250 when the guy just paid 220? So it's
I'm
the
going
way
to
we did our
pause you
job.
right there. Because I live in you probably may or may not know that where I live is a very unattainable real estate market.
Hmm.
People will buy things in our market here, sight unseen,
Hmm.
no appraise. Like, so
Right,
it
cash
is a
over the asking. Right,
yes. So you get your New Yorkers, your Californians. Like my
right,
husband just sold the vineyard sight unseen, no appraisal, and like the I won't say the name of the real estate company, but they really like, came down on my husband because he was just like, well, what do you do if that's what they want? If that's what the
right.
customer wants. So I understand. I'm married to a realtor, so I'm kind of like with you right now. So keep
So
going.
when the market collapsed in 2007, suddenly the properties lost value for the first time in 100 years. Real estate
Yeah.
wasn't as much as worth what it was a year ago.
Right.
So they decided to blame the appraisers. The appraisers
Um,
were inflating these values.
got it.
Um, in fact, I had the FBI out of nowhere. This is a
Oh
true story.
gosh.
One day, I'll never forget it. It was September 10th of 2007. They showed up at my front door.
Wow.
And my wife at the time answered the door and said, "Hold on." I could hear somebody at the door from the office. And she said, "Mike, somebody's here to see you." I said, "Who is it?" And I remember saying the FBI. So I went up to
Wow.
see
Yeah, that's
this,
a biggie.
and there was three guys there. And I must have watched too many movies. But I said to him, I said, "Can I help you?" Now, I had no hint that this was coming at all.
Right.
And they said, "Yes, Mr. Oxley, we were wondering if we could talk to you. Come on in and sit down and have a chat about some properties that you have appraised." And I don't know what clicked in me. It was bizarre to this day. It was bizarre. I said, "No. Do you have a warrant?" And I said, "Get your cheap ass shoes. Are they patent leather or are they pleather off of my effing porch, or you're
Wow.
trespassing?"
Wow.
It was like out of a mob movie. Where
Yeah.
that came from, I don't know. I watched to watch. My wife said, "What are you, insane? Why would you just say that?" I said, "I don't know," but I did. So to make a long story short, Um, I was told I got an attorney. It was very expensive, and
Yeah.
it was a battle back and forth. And it got to the point where they wanted me to name my conspirators. There were no conspirators. It was whoever the bank had. They needed this value. Yes. Would I inflate the value just to make sense of the appraisal so they
And
could get the loan?
isn't that pretty
Yes.
common practice, Mike?
It's the way we
Naming
did business
and
back then.
appraising.
It's the way we did business. Or
Right.
else, if you didn't do it for, say, Wells Fargo, they were going to find somebody else that would
Right,
bring that house in at
exactly. If it
250.
was a name brand bank versus
Right.
your hometown. Yeah, I got you.
So it went back and forth for a while, and I I know we're here about addiction, but
No, no, I think
in
this
a
is
weird
super
way,
entertaining for our
this is
listeners. I like it.
this is what took me into addiction
Yeah,
in a way, and touches on mental health.
yeah.
So I get indicted, and I have this attorney, and he's actually a very famous attorney who has represented a lot of the Philadelphia organized crime figures.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I overshot on the attorney, but I
Maybe.
did, and my behavior at the door. So they came back about a month later and said, "Here's your warrant, but it's not the warrant where we come in. It's a warrant for your property. We want um, uh, these files," and they gave me a list of files they wanted.
Got it.
And I said, "Well, how do I get them to you?" And then I knew I had overshot when the same one I told to get the F off my porch was the same guys, one from the IRS, one from the Secret Service, because
Wow.
because evidently money from one of these mortgage companies was moved overseas, and that is something the Secret Service handles, and of course
Okay.
the local FBI. And to make a long story short, again, he took this warrant and threw it at me and says, "You're the one with the big name lawyer. Have him figure it out for you." And they walked off.
All right.
So I was in over my head. So let's fast forward a few years. The market crashed.
Yeah.
There was no work. I lost my, like a country song. I lost my house. I lost my wife. I lost my mental health.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
worrying about this indictment. Looks like I'm going to. They want me to rat. They want me to know about my conspirators. I don't have anything to rat, and I'll just, I guess, again from watching mob movies, I'll just take the pinch. That's how
Yeah.
I'm not a rat. I'm not going to look over my shoulder. How bad can it be? It's just my opinion. So they made me a deal, believe it or not. And the deal was that I had to travel around the country and instruct other FBI agents and other field officers on the new crime, appraising. That was the crime of the time, and
Wow.
how
That's
appraisers are
interesting.
able to manipulate the market and create their own comps, basically, and inflate the price of appraisals. So
Right.
I became a teacher actually.
That's so
Um,
cool.
so I went around the country. My attorney said,
You
"Don't ever,
became a
don't."
consultant for the FBI.
Right, but kind of, my attorney said never let them pay for a plane ticket for a speaking engagement. Never let them pay for a cup of coffee. We don't want anything when it comes time, but go ahead and do it. So this agent and his name was Derek, and we actually became friends after all this.
I'm sure.
And we had our own shtick. He would get up there and into this crowd of appraisers or real estate brokers and say his spiel about appraising and how it's inflated, and raise your hand if you've ever inflated an appraisal. And of course, the 200 appraisers that are there at the national convention don't raise their hand because they've never inflated an
Of
appraisal.
course not.
And so I went to a guy's house one time and he told me to get the fuck off the porch and commented on my cheap Payless pleather shoes.
Oh,
And this is what the appraiser had said to me. And he would go on his spiel. Then he would say, "And that appraiser is right here. It's Mike Oxley." And then that's how I would be introduced to speak to the crowd. And they would just be like, and then it would begin. Much like Catch Me If You Can, almost, um,
right,
that
right.
movie. So I ended up
Great
in
movie.
prison. I took a little bit of time. I took 90 days in federal camp. Now, I know for people that are watching that have been to county jail and prison, that is not real prison. That is a camp as part of a prison. And it was real to me. When you're not allowed to go where you want or see your kids or do what you want, that's prison. And
Mike, that was your experience. It is your
it's
real
prison.
experience.
The one thing I noticed was when I got to camp, the country club camp, there's a section of the camp that is just for people that have served time and have worked their way down at the end of their sentencing. And we're
Okay.
talking people, as long as it's not a violent crime and as long as it wasn't assault of any kind, between violence, sexual assault, you could be in a camp and wind your way down to a minimum security camp. So I started talking to people. I used it almost like a social experiment. So I got sent to Atlanta, which is the worst camp.
Yeah.
It's horrible,
Yeah.
and but to me it was fine. But I started talking to people, and instead of being the guy that I didn't do this, but this is what the banks wanted, I did it. I did it. So let's cut that out right now. I did it.
All
So
right.
people, I liked people, and there's a whole other half of the that isn't doctors and lawyers and accountants in a camp. These are hardened criminals that have been through the mill, uneducated, mentally ill,
Yeah.
and sometimes, believe it or not, they're in jail because of the Nancy Reagan years of the three strikes you're out. And this is where I kind of started perking my ears up and saying, wow, Nancy Reagan, these are people that got their juvenile records not expunged, added to through the Reagan years as their third time. So for 3 bags of weed, I had these adult, mentally ill, unstable, that were at the end of their sentences and have been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Have been there from medium to minimum to camp, that they have been in jail, prison for 20 years in a federal system because of 3 bags of marijuana.
Yes.
And
Yes.
at this time, these guys are watching the state of Colorado on television ratify the first state to legalize marijuana.
Right.
And I looked at their crestfallen faces like, wait a minute.
Right. Now I'm still here.
There's 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I think they knew that I was real and I cared. And it's a whole part of America that I never really knew. It's a whole group of people that I never associated with, African Americans, uh, low class. I was like one of the few Caucasians at the Atlanta federal camp.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
it made me
for sure. In Atlanta,
it, yeah,
absolutely.
it made me a different person. It made me humble. It made me have more empathy. It made me an empath. It made me look at things really differently. In life, this 90 days that I served, which we know is a smack on the wrist, but I did work hard training the agents on what to look for without being a rat. And
So
that's
you
what,
were, in essence, what I have in my organization. I have peer support specialists. You were actually doing that for real estate. Who would have
right,
thought that you could have been a peer real estate support person? That should be a whole thing. Real
right,
estate agents that are incarcerated for, or appraisers who are incarcerated for a slap on the wrist for making a mistake or a perceived mistake. It's interesting to me that that even happened, because I feel like there should just have been a fine
we
instead of
were very,
taking up daily dollars on tax dollars of American citizens to incarcerate you. Just saying.
and but I did it, and I didn't have to rat, and the FBI actually stood up for me at my sentencing, believe it or not, and with my defense lawyer, and the FBI spoke on my behalf, and that will come back into play in a couple minutes.
Okay.
And they requested that I have no time. I got a $2 million fine um, 5 years of probation, which they could have gave me 20 years of probation. I
Right.
didn't care. No, I'm not going to commit another crime. And yeah, so the judge, called me an enigma and said, Miss Roxy, you are an enigma. And heard all my kids and my family. Even my grandmother was still alive to spend. And she was originally going to give me like 2 years, I think, but she ended up with 90 days. And it's the best 90 days. And I mean that kind of wink, wink, but it changed my life because, and this is where I will make the jump to addiction. When you have nothing and all is lost and the depression hits and the
Yeah.
suicide, I had thoughts like, here I am, 40 years old. I've lost everything. I've never been to federal prison. Well, can I tell you the statistics of white guys um, going to prison for the first time,
It's high.
facing divorce, of suicide? They just go in the garage, hang themselves, and that's the end.
Yeah,
And to
Mike,
tell
I
you
will
that I
tell
didn't
you
think
that
about it, I
my
thought about it.
so 40 to 60-year-old males in general, it doesn't even have to be factors of anything that you just stated, are highest at risk in the United States for suicide. And in Georgia, I think we're one of the highest. We have
You
like
are.
5 counties in Georgia that are the highest in the US in that age range. So I'm
That's
sorry
why
you went through that.
Georgia is kind of an enigma in a way. The
Yeah.
way they now go the other way and help those incarcerated, and a little bit of Todd, and maybe we can get
Yeah.
into Todd and your mission there. But
Yeah.
it helped me. It changed me. When you're at the bottom and there's only one way to look up. Okay, I'm not an addict in recovery. I'm not.
Right.
But I've been there and I've been at the bottom. I've been as low. People that you think your friends weren't my friends anymore. Even family, they were the
Yeah.
worst. But you know what? The ones that were there for me during that tough time, from being a virtual millionaire to having $200 in my account and going to prison,
Gosh,
they're the
that's a
ones. They're
like
the
a
real ones.
whack to the knee, right? I mean,
Yeah. And it's a great lesson in life
yeah.
to really, the people, maybe when I was doing good and I was having things, and not that I wasn't always generous and never got too big for my britches when I was successful having my company, but maybe the cousin that you put aside and you didn't bother with, or the neighbor that you didn't, or the friend that you didn't talk to as much, well, they're the ones that were there. They're
Yeah.
the ones that were there.
Yeah,
And
that's good stuff.
it was almost like going to my wake, as rich as I was at the time. It was being alive and being able to watch the procession line at my own funeral wake and
That's such
seeing
good
who was there.
insight, Mike, on your part, and a really good analogy of what that felt like for you at the time and for our listeners. I'm going to shift you now to how that impacted you in terms of the mental health and addiction space.
Well, as a teenager, and it was a joke, I guess, in the 80s, we didn't have letters for everything: ADD,
Oh,
ADHD,
I
OCD.
understand.
But I have a brother, and I don't know if anybody has ever seen my brother guest appear with Tim and I on Talking Trash podcast. But it was a joke since he was a child, although he was older than me. It was a running joke around the family. My brother always had to do a multiple of four. So as he got in his teen years, mid-teen years, in high school, he would need four forks, four knives, four spoons. He would have to tap the stairs, the railing, four times on his way up.
Was he diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder at all?
No, there was no such thing back then.
Okay.
This was, you weirdo, knock that off.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
strange.
I was
He
just
had it under
curious.
control. He, like, at night in the house, he would have to look under beds four times. It
Ritual.
was like he
Yep.
had a ritual. He absolutely did. So he's going away to college, and he went to pharmacy school, and he became a, not that it didn't run in the family, and it did, he became a rip roaring alcoholic in college.
Got it.
And I'm saying, how does the OCD and addiction and the mental, well, there you go. Because had he been diagnosed and we knew what that was. So
Right.
picture this guy who has this ritual tonight. Now he has a roommate that's not his brother. That's not his little brother that just chalks it off to being weird like me or his parents. He has a roommate and a whole dorm of people. He realizes that if he's drunk, he doesn't do the ritual. He doesn't care about the ritual if he's passed out drunk, right? So that becomes his go to. I guess at night, my brother would drink and drink to dull that ritual and that appearance of nuttiness, which we know now was OCD.
Right.
And that's how he self medicated his OCD. He became a rip roaring alcoholic
Right.
and did for through business, through his career, all the way, and kept it pretty much functional. Pretty much functional, Liz, up till he was about mid 50, like 50, 52 years old.
Got
Then the
it.
wheels fell off and he was no longer functional. But
Mm.
that was my first correlation between mental illness, looking back, and addiction. That he used it as medicine so he didn't act like a nut job. But
Mm.
he wasn't a nut job.
No,
He just
I mean,
had
I understand.
he had OCD. But a way to get through a bunch of 18-year-old men in college and his fraternity and work guys was to be drunk, and he seemed to not worry about it. So I
Right.
always kept that in my head once I made that. I'm sure, Liz, you have many stories of people doing that aha moment when they
Yeah.
realize. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yes.
Of what they do and why they do it.
To be forthright and transparent with you, I have a long time family association with substance use disorder that has affected me. But for the protection of my family, I can't talk about it. So I can't call out people I'm no longer with or folks that are currently in my family or folks that have passed away because those people did not give me the authority to speak about their condition. But with that said, I landed in this path just like you did with kind of like the aha moment of like, wait a minute, we're missing a huge piece of what's going on. There is an unaddressed mental health issue that's causing the substance use disorder, whether that's alcohol, benzodiazepines, opioids, whatever it is. And then sometimes, like in your case, an unaddressed, very severe disorder like obsessive compulsive disorder would be maddening to someone. And they would want to just blunt and stop the effects of that. And then also like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, these disorders are going to be maddening to a person who's suffering from that. Also, the medications are terrible. So, medications for all of these cause blunting affect, meaning that they don't have sexual desire. They don't have any feelings of euphoria. And so, what causes feelings of euphoria? Drugs. So, I mean, come on now. We've got to figure out better ways to address the mental health piece so that we don't cause substance use disorder. And then think about our children. We have children that are being abused sexually, mentally, or they have unaddressed issues in general. And now, I mean, I hate to say it, but there's a conversation being driven to make people gender confused. So then you have that. And I appreciate that. I've worked with children who have been gender confused. And what I tell the children that have talked to me, let your brain get done. When your brain gets
Right.
done, come back and see me. Let your brain develop all the way and if when you're done developing your brain, if you still want to do this or that, let's talk again. but let's not work with a brain that's still developing, right?
Right. You're
And
wanting to
start
be part of the
working with that.
crowd. Wanting to be part of the crowd, and it just seems to be the thing of the times. I'm bi, I'm gay, I'm
Yeah.
pansexual,
Yes.
book sexual. I like to have sex with books. Hey, you know what?
I
You know
mean,
what?
Mike, I'm with you.
That's a lot. That's a
We're a
lot.
rated G podcast, but at the end of the day, like,
Right.
there's a lot of things out there on the internet,
Yeah.
on every type of social media platform that causes confusion to our youth. So,
It's tough enough. It's tough enough out there.
yesterday I was sitting with my practice manager, and her young daughter of 10 happened to be in the office, and she loves to go in my clinical room where I have like a table for patients, and there's a cabinet with meds in there which I keep locked, and all the things. She loves to go in my office and just sit up there. And I went in the kitchen and I opened my laptop, and the first thing that came up on MSN, like on the internet, it was a t-shirt ad that had something extremely raw and crude about oral sex. So if she had been sitting at the kitchen table in my office and had been sitting in front of my laptop, that's what she would see. And that's what every American would see on that particular platform. And I
Right.
called her mother over and I said, just FYI, I want you to know that this is what's on today's news feed. And I'll just tell you the caption, eating out. It was
Oh,
a
great.
t-shirt. And so with that said, like, I try to keep it rated G on here, but like, let's just say this isn't healthy. There is no healthy America right now. I mean, we're trying to get there. It's a conversation, but we know that we're in a state of disrepair. Mental health and addiction go hand in hand 100% of the time. That is not
Absolutely.
the American standard. I don't even think it's the European standard for diagnostic criteria, that there would always be that. But I see it 100% of the time. I work on every Friday right now. I go into a detention center and I see clients that have put in for mental health sick call. And so I work with them and I see every type of person. I don't see anybody that hasn't suffered with substance use disorder. So there's that. So I haven't seen anybody that doesn't suffer from substance use disorder. I also don't see anybody that doesn't also have a co-occurring disorder, whether it's ADHD, depression, panic disorder, adjustment disorder, you name it, it's there.
I'll expand it to a couple sentences, which I really held on to. Tim, my former co-host, had said this, and I use it all the time because truer words have not been spoken about sobriety and recovery. And you may have heard Tim
I
say
know
this,
where you're
and I'll
going with
say it
this.
to those who are watching it right now. If you're not getting high and you're not using and you're not drinking, you're sober. You are sober, and congratulations, because it is a battle. I, people talk about quitting smoking. I went through that. That's tough. But I'm going to tell you, if you're in the battle to give up your disorder as far as substance abuse, you're in the battle. But recovery from that battle is something totally different. And the way Tim put it is sober is fleeting. You're not in recovery until you get to the bottom of what the mental ailments were
Yeah.
to make you use and self medicate.
Yeah.
Until you
Boom.
fix the problem, right.
Yes.
That has always rung with me, and I've gained that. I'm always learning, as a nurse, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
And,
Me too.
you know, um, so keep that. And the audience that's listening to me right now, think about that for a moment. You can be sober, but not in recovery.
Yes.
And not in recovery means fixing the stuff that's wrong, admitting it, fixing it.
Yes.
And that is what's wrong. That bridge between the two is really, well, you're sober now. So carry on, get back to work, but get back home, get back doing what you were doing. But if you're going to be around in the same situations and doing the same thing, but not self medicating that way, you're not in recovery. And
Right. And
really, it's about
this is
recovery,
where I'm going
Liz.
to take you in a different direction, and we might even end on this note, Mike, is as a person who's treating all of this, right, in practice, right? I'm be opening up my own thing soon. Think about this. I'm seeing a large number of prescriptions being written that are legal that I think can possibly either trigger future addiction or and I'm not talking about opioids because we know that's a whole thing. Let's as the Sacklers is going to be I'm going to talk about the Sacklers on a whole podcast. You wait, it's coming.
Okay.
But if you think about the show Goliath with Billy Bob Thornton, I don't know if you watched it, but man,
Yes, I
what
did.
a show! That was a spinoff of the Sacklers. But I'll talk about that another time. But I'm looking at prescriptions that are being prescribed that treat ADHD, that even early on, that I think when practitioners they start pulling back their methylphenidate. Where do you think a college student is going to go to get what is that amphetamine salt? Meth, right? So
Absolutely.
if you're prescribing an 8-year-old,
Or maybe cocaine,
yes,
but
yeah,
definitely they're
but
going to want
cocaine's
that.
expensive.
Yeah, they're going to want
So
that
probably
boost.
they're not going to go for cocaine.
Right.
They're going to go for meth. It's cheap, 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 cheap. I'm telling you, I am seeing about I've so I started seeing patients in at the end of March, and we are in April. I have now a caseload of 99 patients. So 99
And
patients in a very short period of time.
the rural part, and I wanted to ask you about how the rural recovery rally went with you guys last month, but I
Oh,
wanted to know
it
about
was so
your
good.
percentage of meth use
Oh,
that is
uh,
at the forefront of the word rural is almost interchangeable with meth
Yeah, so
these days,
I'm gonna say 98% of the time you're gonna see meth usage, fentanyl with xylazine mix, which I just did a great handout about the zombie drug xylazine and the
which is scary because you could die.
it is. Yeah,
They're
you're dying.
basically bullets.
We're teaching right now ERs and EMS how to treat coming up on a client who does not respond to Narcan. Stop popping them with Narcan. It's not going to work. You got to breathe. You got to breathe for them. You got until you can intubate them. That's the only way you're going to keep them alive because their respiratory is completely shut down. So, I have a good team of people that write education for me. They've just come up with a great handout on that. We'll be passing that out across the state. I'd love to see our education go nationwide because I don't think people. I had a doctor say to me recently, Mike, and it's crazy. I said something about xylazine, and this doctor says to me, "Excuse me, I'm not sure if you understand the conversation. We're talking about opioids." And I had to
Listen,
say, "Excuse me, Doctor
well,
So
you've
and So."
treated a patient with a flesh-eating bacteria from what has been added to the
To
already
the
fake
fentanyl,
opioid.
which is an opioid.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have a huge nation of uneducated physicians, ER physicians, EMS workers that have no idea what they're dealing with. And I've seen cases of EMS workers popping Narcan 7 and 8 times on
Oh, come
someone
on.
within seconds. They're not
They're
coming
going to
back, so
cause a
they don't know
cardiac
what to
arrest the
do.
other way. It's going to be cardiac arrest the other way. But
Correct.
I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, it's funny that I have another cause, which was the way healthcare is treating the addict when they come into an ER.
Oh,
And um, the second class citizen, you're just a junkie. You can't be
yeah.
having chest pain. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And bringing them from my facility. That was
Mike,
another,
I'm going to bring you back and you and I are going to,
right.
we're going to
I
pan
think
that
if I
out
was
and
closer, we would be friends. I think I'd be hanging out with you guys.
you would.
I,
I'm going to
I'm
bring
retired now.
a colleague of mine who's an ER doctor. He's been jamming to come on the podcast and talk about ER stuff. It would be really cool to have the three of us, I think banter through what ER, psych, and mental health looks like, because I think you probably know I did ER, behavioral health addiction, first. And well, no, not
Right.
first, it's like second in my career to behavioral health and addiction. And I got to open that up, and of course it was a gray area. We're running
My
out of
daughter
time, Mike.
became my daughter became a nurse practitioner, and
Nice.
they lumped them two together in school now, addiction and psychology. Right.
That's
Okay.
me. That's what I
That's
am.
okay. That's what my
Yeah, me
daughter
and your
is.
daughter, we're apparently the same thing. That's so cool. I love that. Mike,
I was a very young dad,
of course you were 12. Um,
16.
I so love having you on today.
Thanks for
I'm glad
having
that
me.
you and I are friends on the outside of this. Got to know you through being a guest on your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Hey, America, if you ever want me back, you got to badger her. I would love to see you guys again. I got plenty good prison stories that I
That'd be
didn't tell you.
so cool. We can definitely jam in the future. Mike, such a pleasure.
Thanks for
Any
having me.
last words you want to say? I just want to say thank you for coming on. You're amazing. I want to broadcast that you are a nurse. You're a person who is not in long-term recovery, but has a big background in mental health as it correlates to addiction. And thank you for being a subject matter expert on the Clearly Well podcast today. Appreciate you being
Keep,
on.
keep trying, America. Keep trying.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if it's your 100th time trying. I love you all.
Thank you. Same here, Mike. Bye. Peace.
Take care.
Bye.
I want to state that please do not substitute this podcast for professional therapy or treatment. The content shared here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We do ask our listeners to respect the diverse experiences of individuals and refrain from passing judgment. If you or someone you know needs professional help, please seek the guidance of a registered and qualified mental health professional. Clearly Well is brought to you by Healthy Georgia and produced by CNC Media.